Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. And on this sunny morning I'm looking at a book from Elgar Publishing in their Research Handbook series. This one's an important book. It's a detailed book, and it's a book where you need to have some basic understanding before you read it because it's at a high level. It's the Research Handbook on Sovereign Wealth Funds and International Investment Law. Now, it's an important area of international law. It's edited by Fabio Bassan, and as I've indicated, it's part of Edward Elgar's stable of books. They're an independent family publisher. They produce the high-end quality academic research books, and they're extremely helpful. And to know of their existence and the content, I think it does assist scholars immensely in trying to fathom some of the more difficult areas that they're actually studying. My wife Elizabeth and I have had a good look at this book. It's available as a book, an e-book, and it's also available at Elgaronline. And when we wrote the review, we gave our title for the review this: Another High-Level Financial Research Handbook from Elgar on International Investments. Let's just have a look at the book quickly to begin with. It's a hardback, there it is, and then the spine at the back, and then the back. It runs to under 500 pages. There is the index right at the back. Then, as you would expect, you go from the index there straight into the text itself, and you can see from the text there's chapter 14. You've got a lot of footnoting, of course. You've got numbering. It's more in the nature of just basic numbering of subheadings and so forth. But if we go to the front of the book, you can see there's the front cover there, and then there's the information about Elgaronline. That's the contents section, split into various parts, 6 parts in total, 14 chapters with an index. Then there's some figures, and then you've got the tables, and then the contributors. Now I'm going to run through these people very quickly. They're very important in their own right. I can't mention them all by name, but they're all well-known people, extremely eminent in their own fields, and you can see from that we go straight then into the introduction itself. The introduction by Bassan is well worth reading. It gives you some idea of the research content and what he's actually what his purpose is with this particular book, and then we go straight from there into the first chapter. There is abbreviation, SWF being Sovereign Wealth Funds. And so be aware a little bit of some of he does tend to go into abbreviations a lot, as you probably can see. So be aware of that. I didn't find an abbreviations table anywhere, which probably would have been of some help. But however, I'm not criticising the book really, because it's like all the books review. I don't review books which are rubbish. This is not a rubbish book. It's a very important book. And there's certainly no point in reviewing books which I'm going to be critical of. It's not constructive at all. What we say about the book is as follows. Edward Elgar Publishing have taken over the mantle as one of the leading legal publishing houses which produce high quality research material for the top end of academic endeavours, whether it be by way of publishing edited theses or bringing together an array of glittering experts in a particular field to give us all a bit of individual enlightenment on the more difficult bits of financial law. And that's what we've got here, because they're not easy bits to understand. As I've said, the fact that there are a lot of abbreviations does clutter it a bit, and so you've got to think carefully about what he's actually talking about. But here, with the Research Handbook on Sovereign Wealth Funds and International Investment Law, it's been edited by the admirable Professor Fabio Bassan and his 17 colleagues. We have another timely contribution to this area of intellectual debate on international investment law. And Bassan, of course, will be well known to many readers for his previous work from Elgar, which was produced in 2011. And that was entitled The Law of Sovereign Wealth Funds. It hasn't come out in a new edition or anything, but that is effectively, in my view, a bit of a companion to this work. 4 years later, of course, we have this new collection of essays researching the role that sovereign investments can play at a time of crisis when the materials and commentaries which are available to academics remain still are highly unsatisfactory, although a start of course has been made. This is one of the problems. There's a bit of a gap here. And I'll come back to that theme in a minute. What Bassan continues then with his main theme to say is actually contained in the introduction, and that is, he writes that the focus continues to be on the active side, that's investment flows and trends, grounded in economic scenarios and objectives. Now, we have to have the word scenarios in it, don't we? But you know what I mean. Note the use of the words here then. He then goes on to say that conversely, investigations from a legal standpoint are still few and not focused on the passive side. And he's talking about the active side rather than the passive side. And namely, the host state's concerns about sovereign investments, goals and tools. I think an important point to be made here. He concludes that both foreign direct investment and portfolio investments remain unexplained, so his aim is to investigate the state of the art of the legal investigation, plugging gaps by his contributors, and he does just that with his method. And we'll come back to those phrases in a minute. So we can confirm that the book's original structure, whereby the editor set the contributors' specific tasks, is rightly described as illustrating the state of the art of the legal investigation on sovereign investments and filling necessary gaps, as I've said, in previous research with new research views. And he's effectively tapped them on the shoulder and said, this is what I want you to look at, which I think will again be of some help, probably, to the scholar and researcher. The editor's current research focus is based on investment flows and trends, grounded in economic scenarios and objectives set out in his introduction. Conversely, investigations from a legal standpoint remain few in number, namely disregarding the host state's concerns about sovereign investment goals and tools, which is where the holes really are, in my view. But I think what we've got here is a very valuable commentary as to what we're looking at and where the problems are. Let me conclude by saying that most of the many relevant drivers that affect current sovereign investments, whether they are FDI or portfolio investments, remain unexplained. So the tasks to investigate the juridical foundation of sovereign investments and extends really actually from that only to our frontier of understanding, being undertaken with relish by all of the authors concerned. Bassan wants each chapter in the handbook to have one least common denominator and a fil rouge connecting all chapters, and he does just that when you read the book, which, as it is to be expected, is highly complex and there's a great deal of detail, but that's what you're getting when you get the book. Thank you then, Professor Bassan, as you've moved the discussion of sovereign wealth funds and international investment law some paces forward in 2015, and I think we can all be very grateful to him for that. Here's the book again, hardback, as I say, spine and then the back, just opening it in the middle. Here we go, this is part 5, SWF investment protection, very important area. You can see you've got the introduction. What you do have, I'll just go to the previous chapter, you see the structures, you do have conclusions, so there is properly, you have a beginning, a middle and an end basically to every essay, and that I think is extremely helpful because you do actually want to get some sort of conclusion from what in fact the contributor is putting forward. For instance, on this particular chapter there's the conclusion there, and as I've said, you do have quite a large amount of footnoting, which is useful, and at the front sovereign wealth funds are well described right at the beginning. I know that I mentioned the sister book to this, but it is in fact, this is an important work in its own right, because obviously it's giving a lot of different views. There's the front page, and let me just show you the contents again there and there. Anyway, thank you very much, Professor Bassan and all your colleagues. It's been a most useful book to review. I've learned something by reviewing the book. I've also learnt that I know very little about this subject in comparison with what I thought I knew initially, and that must be a plus factor. Thank you anyway to all concerned. Bye-bye.